Hi and welcome to our last class on the golden calf and the sin of the spies. This time we are dealing with the sin of the spies and with the question of what was actually the sin. And so I'm letting you work through the page and through the questions and the chapter 14 of the book of Bamidbar, Numbers. But I would like to deal today with the midrash that I gave you right at the beginning of the sheet. It is a very interesting midrash in my opinion. It's a midrash that speaks about what night it was, which to some extent speaks to the whole issue of what is the great deal that and the great importance that we attribute to the sin of the spies. So here is the midrash. You have it on the very first page of our learning. The midrash comes from Midrash Tanchuma. Midrash Tanchuma is a midrash probably written in the land of Israel in the 5th or the 6th century. That, of course, means that the material in it is from that period or earlier. So here we go. Vatisa kol ha'edah. The entire gathering raised their voice. Vayivke, and they cried that night. The people cried that night. Shebachu ha'edah belel Tisha B'Av. The congregation cried on the night of Tisha B'Av. Ve'amar lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Holy One, blessed be He, said to them, Atem bechitem bechiyah shel chinam lefanai. You cried in vain before me. Ani ekba lachem laila ze bechiyah ledorot. I shall set this night aside for all generations for crying. Uminota sha'a, and it was at that time, נגזרה על בית המקדש שתחרב ועל ישראל שיגלו בין אומות העולם. It was at that time that it was decreed that the temple should be destroyed and the people of Israel should go into exile among the nations. How does the Midrash know that? It brings a verse from Tehillim, from Psalms, from chapter 106. Vayisa yado lahem, and he, God, raised his hand, it's a form of an oath, lehapil otam bamidbar, to drop them, to put them down in the desert, ulehapil zar'am bagoyim, and to fell their offsprings among the nations, velizarotam ba'aratzot, and to scatter them among the countries. Nesiat yad keneged nesiot kol, the raising of a hand for the raising of the voice. It's a midah keneged midah, a measure for a measure. In other words, the people raise their voice, and that raising causes God to raise his hand in oath. It is a curious midrash that decides that before ever entering the land of Israel, the night of Tisha B'Av is already decreed. In other words, the exile from the land, the being thrown out of the land, is decreed before ever entering the land. And the cause for this decree is the refusal of the people to put their full faith in God and in the land. Something in that relationship is now cracked and it cannot be mended. It cannot be fixed. That threat is constantly hanging over. The threat that one day the people who refuse to go into the land will actually be thrown out of the land. Now, I ask you whether or not this is a new midrash that comes around at the time of Midrash Tanchuma in the 5th century, or an earlier one. Notice that all the midrash is really doing is picking up on a verse in the book of Psalms. In other words, a biblical text, a canonized biblical text, much, much, much earlier than the midrash itself. The verse suggests that God raised his hand not only that to scatter us in the desert and to fell us in the desert, as we learn from chapter 14 in the book of Bamidbar in Numbers, but also that at the same time God took an oath that he will scatter us among the nations. That there's no mention of in the Torah itself. But by the time we get to the book of Psalms, and to this psalm for which we don't have an exact date, we already have a tradition that says that when Bnei Israel, when the people of Israel rejected the land way back, before they ever entered it, they already set the decree that later on they will be thrown out of the land. If you took a look at chapter 20 of Ezekiel, you see that that is a very prominent idea. The idea that God's raised hand in an oath means either to bring us into the land or to throw us out of the land. The land of Israel is a very central part of God's oath. And so here we are, the night that the people cry in vain is the night that they set for Tisha B'Av, for all future generations, for all the disasters that will happen because the people of Israel are no longer in the land of Israel.